Welcome everyone to a new edition of the Intent Roundtable Sessions. My name is Ana Maria Montero, and I am joined today by our host, André Hoffmann, who is also the co-founder of the Intent platform, along with his wife, Rosalie, about 1 year ago. André, always a pleasure, and thank you for hosting us. And of course, front and center, we are also joined by the CEO of the Worldwide Fund for Nature Switzerland, Thomas Vellacott. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
For being with us. Okay, now before we get into today's theme discussion, which is in fact impact measurement tools, for those people who are new to the Intent platform, André, if you could just give us a brief description of the motivation behind this, the intention, if I could say.
Thank you very much, Ana Maria. And yes, we do have an intention in Intent. That's why we've called it Intent. And the idea is to create sort of bridges between people and solution, between trying to understand what the problem that facing humanities are and how we can deal with them in a constructive manner. So thank you very much for helping us to have these conversations, which bring together people from different walks of life in order to create this relationship we want to foster, to make sure that there is a future for humanity.
As a very, as someone for whom I assume the impact measurement tools play a very important role, Thomas, walk us through what this means for you at the WWF.
So impact measurement is central for us because we depend on the trust we get from our donors. And so we need to show what we actually do with the money we get. So it's important that we can show impact. People do not just want good intention, they want tangible impact. So it's important we can show them what the impact is on the ground, what actually changes in terms of biodiversity, what the benefits are for people out of the projects we do.
And what about your work with the corporate partners?
So there again, it's hugely important for our work with corporates. Because I think, again, that we're seeing a massive shift at the moment from a sort of corporate social responsibility approach of companies doing a little bit of good on the side to companies realizing that impact is actually central to their survival and central to their success. So we're seeing a real revolution there in terms of how companies are dealing with impact. And what we do is we work with them in setting ambitious targets and then in helping them to implement those targets and also reporting to the outside world. So, for example, for our corporate partners, we agree on multi-year targets, which are then published. And annually, they report on where they stand in achieving those targets. That's the kind of transparency that customers and investors today expect.
And this is something that have you seen it also grow, this trend grow within the company, or is this something that was always, because as I understand it, the vision for WWF is, in fact, engage, talk to them, and hold them accountable. So this is actually part of the vision there.
Definitely, and it's become much more important in the last couple of years, because as you've seen more and more companies shift to address issues of impact, they're doing it very differently. You get the companies that actually make a difference, and then you get the companies that just window dress. And the difference is impact and how you report on your impact. So it really makes a difference as a company that you can show that you're not just talking about something, but you're actually doing it as well. Yeah. And I'm convinced it really is part of and parcel of whether a company will exist in the future or not. Because if you take something like the net zero goals, which mean as a company you need to be able to operate in a world that basically doesn't use fossil fuels anymore. Well, unless you have a vision and a path for how you get there, and you're serious about implementing that today, well, you are not going to be around in that world.
Mm-hmm. I see you nodding quite a bit there.
Absolutely. I think it's important to sort of go away from this notion of profit and non-profit. I mean, the idea that you're having an impact, every human endeavor, every way of moving something has an impact onto the world in which we live. And by looking just at the financial sector, which is the traditional reporting accounting system, you are missing the impact on the social system, you're missing the impact on the human, on talents, and you're missing the impact on the environment. So a corporation or any endeavor, human endeavor, which ignores the free capitals, is going to go very quickly into a situation where it cannot function anymore. So I agree. Yeah.
And I mean, we're even seeing it today that customers, I think, are expecting more and more and not just words, but actually actions, and also more and more talent as well. So if you want to recruit the best talent on the market, you had better have impact that you can show and not just that you can talk about.
So
They want to know.
the purpose of the company cannot just be to make money.
Yeah.
It has to bring something else. It has to contribute to something else. And talent retention is the biggest challenge we have at the moment collectively, not only in the profit sector, but in non-profit as well.
And how big a challenge do you see the shift in mindset that has to happen? I mean, it seems like it's happening, but is it fast enough?
It's happening, yes, and it's happening much faster than it was 5 years ago, but it's nowhere close to being fast enough. And it's not broad enough. You get a couple of companies that really get that the kind of transformation we're in is very fundamental, and it draws into question a lot of existing business models. But you get a lot of companies that have not understood that, and that still look at impact measurement as something you do kind of to just keep investors happy. But impact measurement is not the end goal. Impact measurement is a means to an end. The end is to have impact and to manage for impact. And I think that's a kind of shift of understanding that not many companies have done yet.
For too many companies, there's still this paradigm, let us first make money, and then we can deal with sustainability. And that is just not realistic. I mean, if you don't take sustainability, durability, long-term thinking as a core of your business, you're going to get out of business.
So is it optimistic to say then that we are experiencing an impact revolution?
Well,
Are we there?
The fact that we're talking about it is already very optimistic, isn't it? We're moving. What do you think? No.
Yeah, I often get asked if I'm optimistic or pessimistic about whether we're going to make the transition
You're
in time.
in a position of yes. I would ask myself that too.
It's happening, and it's happening much faster than it did in the past, but it's not happening fast enough. So the question is, will we be able to scale up fast enough this impact revolution? But if you look at how transitions happen in history, they're not linear. They usually follow some kind of an S-curve. So I think this is far from being impossible. So I'm more optimistic than a lot of the people I meet, but there is a lot of work ahead.
Well, and to your point, there's a lot of, there has been an increased attention, as we said, not only on the situation, but also on the IMTs, impact measurement tools, recent publications by the WEF, and as well as a new book by Sir Ronald Cohen, Impact, are two examples from the last year. What has triggered, do you think, the attention just within this short time?
I think it is part of the expectations which have just changed, and a realization that the previous sort of corporate sustainability approach was not enough. That people were expecting something much more precise, something much more meaningful in terms of the impact measurements that we can show to. So I think that's sort of the demand side, if you will. Then there's the supply side, where I think with digital developments, we're today able to measure impact much more cheaply, much more in real time. We are then able to analyze data, much larger sets of data. So there's an ability really to, for example, in supply chains, to get much more visibility and transparency in supply chains that would have been unthinkable even 4 or 5 years ago. Whereas now you can measure, you can get real-time alerts if somewhere in your supply chain you see a forest being set alight, for example. So that is really changing things, because you can then take sustainability from a small niche where you were auditing with great costs to the mainstream where you can do things very cheaply and in real time using technology.
Well, this is a reason to be optimistic.
There's also this realization that the impact that humanity is having on the planet. We see signs of it everywhere. I mean, adverse climate events, there have been more hurricanes than ever this year, forest fires in huge quantities, the depletion of fishing stocks. All these things can be measured, and you can see the impact this is having. And so I think that the idea of trying to identify along along the chain where the origin of this pressure on the system is, it has become very real. And in particular, the consumer, but perhaps also the average citizen, is getting more and more worried about what's happening around the place.
Yeah.
And this is in our evolved economies. If you go into emerging economies, you also realize that the fight for survival has become more difficult because of pressure on the system, rather than because of an exported prosperity.
And I think if I could just add to that, I think what we have seen, and this again is quite a recent development, is that more and more people are experiencing those effects directly in terms of climate change isn't something that might come sometime in the future, but it's here now, and it's affecting not just nature. So it's not just about saving the polar bears. It's about saving us and about saving our children. And there you are triggering an effect in terms of looking after our young ones, which is beyond left or right, or are you for or against the environment. This is about our survival. So you're triggering something in a lot more people. And I think on the corporate side, what you're seeing is more and more companies realizing that it's not enough to just limit the damage they're doing, but they actually have to show what the positive contribution is that they are making to solving these problems.
And of course, we have to mention the COVID, the pandemic.
Well, I was just going to get there.
The pandemic has
what's
just
the
a
effect of the
perfect
pandemic?
demonstration about the strain that the whole planet is under. Here we are convinced that we run the place, and some minute little virus comes and kills us all. And and you expect us to still say, oh, everything is in order. No, I mean, we do have an issue. We must address it. We must address it because we can see that the limits of the system are getting more and more apparent. And in that respect, the COVID has been a great accelerator.
I think it's really made people understand what the web of life on this planet is like, and that if you change something in one distant place, it's actually not that distant. Very quickly, it becomes something that is existential for us here. So it's accelerated this mind shift, which we've already started seeing with climate change before that. And I think the other thing it's accelerating is just through the economic effects it's having, some of the behavioral changes we already saw beforehand, and some of the economic shifts we've been seeing. So it's a big accelerator in a way.
And what have you seen at the WWF as a result of the pandemic, specifically?
So I think we're seeing actually higher levels of support among the population. Higher awareness of these connections between us and nature, and more of a willingness to do something about it and be part of the solution. So we're seeing that in the numbers of our supporters. For example, we were afraid that with the pandemic, the focus would shift to something completely different, and people might no longer care about the environment. Actually, the opposite has happened. It's strengthened people's concern and people's commitment to do something about these issues.
Thank you, Thomas, so much for your insights. And of course, for joining us. André, thank you so much for hosting us here today on the roundtable sessions. And to all of you, of course, for joining us and for being part of this. There are more intent roundtable sessions to come, so do stay tuned.